Have you ever wondered the root causes to your Hashimoto's and if there's anything you could potentially do to reverse your Hashimoto's thyroiditis? In this video, I'm going to cover the top 5 root causes that we see in clients every single day that are both triggers and drivers of their Hashimoto's disease. Now, before we get into it, let me tell you a brief story about a client that came to work with us. We're going to call her Rory. When Rory came to work with us, she was already eating a very anti-inflammatory diet. She had already done quite a bit of different functional labs and had addressed a lot of different root causes that were driving some of the symptoms that she was experiencing, such as fatigue and brain fog. However, she really was interested in understanding the root causes and drivers of her Hashimoto's so that she could hopefully get to the point where she had lowered her antibodies and also come off thyroid hormone medication. And this is something that we do for dozens and dozens of women every single day, is help them lower their antibodies to a place of stabilization or even place of non-existence and get them off thyroid hormone medication and manage things with food as medicine and lifestyle practices. So we did 3 key things when we started with her treatment. The first one was looked at her total viral load. I wanted to understand if there could be reactivations of past infections like Epstein-Barr virus. The second one we looked at was her gut microbiome to understand if there was any drivers in there that could be impacting her gut immune system as well as driving the process of leaky gut. And the third thing we looked at was her total vitamin and mineral status so that we could see if there was adequate antioxidants on board and if she had enough of the key minerals that regulate and convert the thyroid function. Now, let's get into those 5 root causes so that you can see how this all ties together. The first root cause of Hashimoto's is genetic susceptibility, and you may have heard of this before. If someone in your family, especially a close relative like a sister, brother, or parent, has an autoimmune disease, you are at an increased likelihood of also developing an autoimmune disease. However, it's your genes that load the gun, but it's your environment and your lifestyle that actually pull the trigger on that autoimmunity developing. And that's why these other 4 key root causes are going to be so critical to understand. Now, if you've ever been pregnant, you may also know if you have HLA antibodies. HLA antibodies typically develop and come about during pregnancy because of the transmission between the baby and the mother. If you've ever donated blood, this could be another place that you've understood if you have HLA antibodies. HLA antibodies essentially just decrease your immune system's tolerance and increase the susceptibility of an autoimmune disease developing. The second root cause is any type of large hormonal transition. For women, this is particularly evident because there's several hormonal transitions that women go through. The first one being pregnancy, if you've ever been pregnant. The second one being if you've ever used an oral contraceptive or hormonal birth control. And the third one being menopause. Anytime there's a big hormonal transition, this can impact the immune system because of the way that key hormones like estrogen and progesterone regulate the immune system's function. So as we see in pregnancy, this big shift in estrogen that happens during pregnancy to then after labor can actually flare the immune system and can even cause something what we call postpartum thyroiditis. Postpartum thyroiditis essentially is where in the acute stages, you have elevated thyroid antibodies, but your thyroid hormones present more like Graves' disease or hyperthyroidism. And then typically a couple months later, the pendulum swings the other way and we still have thyroid antibodies that are elevated. However, presentation is more like Hashimoto's thyroiditis and that there's low levels of thyroid hormones or hypothyroidism. A lot of times postpartum thyroiditis corrects itself on its own. However, it does significantly increase the risk for development of Hashimoto's. As I mentioned before, being on oral contraceptives or hormonal birth control can also increase the risk because when you are on oral contraceptives, it's shutting down that HPO, that brain to ovarian axis, and it's putting more strain on the liver and your detoxification pathways. And the liver plays an extremely important role in Hashimoto's as well as thyroid hormone production. About 70% of our inactive thyroid hormone T4 is actually converted over to the active form T3 in the liver. If you've ever been through or are going to be going through menopause anytime soon, this can also be another big hormonal transition because of the big drop that happens in those estrogen levels. It decreases the immune system tolerance, and that's one of the reasons why oftentimes when women go through menopause, we see other types of conditions present. Estrogen is very anti-inflammatory as well, so it helps to be able to control the inflammation process, and inflammation and oxidative stress can drive the autoimmune process. The third root cause is gut permeability or dysbiosis. This essentially is where the microbiome is imbalanced. There is an overgrowth of opportunistic bacteria and not enough good beneficial bacteria, what we call your probiotics. This can lead to gut permeability or leaky gut. This is one of those 3 triggers of an autoimmune disease when we look at what we call the 3-legged stool model, which is genetic predisposition, a leaky gut, and an environmental stressor. So we want to really look at what's going on in the gut, even if you're asymptomatic, because we do see this a lot in individuals with Hashimoto's that they're not having any GI symptoms, but there still is a leaky gut situation at play. And we want to also account for the gut immune system, as this is about 70% of our total immune function comes from our gut. So when we're talking about autoimmunity, the gut is going to play a very central role in how the overall immune system functions. As I mentioned for that client example, we always want to look at environmental and infectious triggers. The different infections that can occur earlier in life can increase your viral load through a process of what we call reactivation. So if you've ever had mono as a younger kid or as a teen, your body can actually reactivate that mononucleosis virus because mono or Epstein-Barr virus can actually get reactivated, and this reactivation process can actually increase the overall viral load and suppress the immune system's tolerance, and that can be one of those stressors that triggers the autoimmune process occurring. There's other viral infections, things like mononucleosis, as well as cytomegalovirus, and other things within the immune system like mycotoxins or mold. So if you've been exposed to mold, especially if you've lived somewhere where there's large amounts of exposure, or if there's even things like parasites that are more so coming from the gut, but they're impacting that overall immune function, these all play into that viral load and impact that overall immune system tolerance and can really be the trigger and driver of the autoimmune process. Sometimes we see with patients too that they've never known that they had any of these viruses, but when we do testing, we see those elevated IgG antibodies. You can have what we call silent mono, and this is prevalent in many individuals with Hashimoto's, and that's one of the reasons why we look at testing both IgG and IgM antibodies of EBV so that we can understand if there has been reactivation that's occurring and what the immune system's tolerance is. We also may look at something like a lymphocyte map that really tells us how the immune system is handling these different viral loads, and that will really give us insight into the best treatment strategy and timeline for what your treatment might look like by utilizing some of the different natural treatments that we utilize in practice. And the 5th root cause is nutritional deficiencies. Nutrients are the key piece of the immune system function and of our thyroid function. If there are not enough antioxidants on board, key things like selenium and sulfur that help our body make its own endogenous glutathione, this is going to significantly impact the thyroid autoimmunity progression because the process of making thyroid hormones is a very oxidative stress inducing process. There's a lot of inflammation that occurs just by nature of our body utilizing iodine and tyrosine to make thyroid hormones. So we want to make sure that there's enough key antioxidants on board. We also want to make sure that there's adequate minerals to be able to make and convert thyroid hormones. These are things like zinc, magnesium, selenium, molybdenum, and we can actually look at levels of these both serum and in your bloodstream as well as cellularly within the red and white blood cells by doing specific types of vitamin and mineral blood testing. Another option we might explore is looking at doing hair tissue mineral analysis so that we can see longer term storage of these minerals as well as things like heavy metal levels alongside of this. These different vitamin and minerals play key roles in how our mitochondria function, and when there is low thyroid hormone levels, like what we see with most cases of Hashimoto's, it's going to decrease our mitochondrial function, and that can then present with other issues within the immune system's tolerance, as well as symptoms like energy, fatigue issues, histamine intolerance, and so forth. So by understanding how these vitamin minerals are functioning, and if we have enough of those key ones to be able to support the immune system, our mitochondria, and thyroid hormone production, this is going to play a really pivotal piece in being able to support your immune tolerance and being able to ultimately, hopefully, get you off of thyroid hormone replacement. Now, if you want to learn more about the mitochondria and their role in everything from energy to fertility and beyond, you're going to want to watch my next video on the role of mitochondria and fertility.